Good morning, everybody. It is the morning tip-off with Imman, and I decided to switch things up a little bit. So last night, I asked for some questions so that I can answer them on this solo dolo pod, and I came to realize that Raptor fans are really sad and probably need more of a therapy session. And there are some really good questions in here, and I definitely want to get to some of them in more detail. I want to get to some of them at length. Robel had a good one here where let me find it. He asked, which non-Boucher / Stanley Raptor have you seen the most growth with? Oh, can't speak. And I wanted to talk about OG Anunoby. I wanted to talk about Fred VanVleet and their growth, and the growth that we've seen from Norman Powell, I think, in the last few games and what that means. But before I get into that, because I feel like that might just take longer than what I have this morning, so I figure some of these questions I'm going to save for a later date. I've bookmarked them all. I want to get to them. But I thought we kind of needed a little bit of a Raptors therapy session looking at some of the questions that we got. So bear with me. I'm going to try and give it. Did I even mention this is the morning tip-off? Look at the title, guys. Raptors Group Therapy Session with Imman, brought to you by Basketball News. Check out all of the podcasts on the Basketball News Network. Check out Dishes and Dimes. I might answer some of these questions on Dishes and Dimes because there are a lot of really good ones here, and I think there are ones that we can talk about more at length. Yesterday, if you didn't see, I had Yasmin on, and we were talking about her article. Check it out on basketballnews.com about Kyle Lowry and the fact that the Raptors have a 13-0 streak when Kyle doesn't play and what that means. I think there's a lot of noise in that number. Specifically, yesterday I was talking about how the Raptors, and I've seen this on the timeline, I know that Saad's tweeted about this, but the Raptors really do have a lot of guys that step up when given the roles, the opportunity, and the minutes too, right? Higher usage guys. We saw it just the other day with OG Anunoby putting up 30 points when Siakam and Lowry weren't in the lineup. We see it in the Raptors record when Norman Powell starts. We saw it all of last season when there were so many injuries, and we looked at that as kind of a negative, and obviously you want your team to be as healthy as possible, but it did allow for this growth. It did allow for Norman Powell to have the year he had. It allowed for Fred VanVleet to that Lakers game early on in the season when Lowry was out. Those are types of games where you're expecting your young guys to step up, and they did it. And that's what the Raptors have had, and that's part of why they were so successful last year. And I think that's part of why we have some optimism moving forward as well. So I'll get into that in a bit. Sorry, you guys. Okay, but before we do, I'm the only person who asked me a non-Raptors related question, so I figured I might as well get in to the response of that. His question was about Ben Simmons specifically. So he said, how the F has Ben Simmons been allowed to go 12 seasons without getting any better? So to answer that really quickly, I think part of it is that he was really good to start the year, to start his career. Anytime that you're being compared to LeBron James, I think there's something to that. He was so good in his rookie season that the knock on him not being the rookie of the year was that he technically wasn't a rookie. Where we never said that about Blake Griffin, right? We've never said that about when guys miss an entire season. But that was the knock on him not winning rookie of the year, was that he's not really a rookie. Since then, he hasn't improved. He still made All-NBA last year. So there's I don't know. He's a very difficult person to have a conversation about because, yes, if he took his game to the next step, if we saw him add a jumper, if we saw him be more aggressive, and I think that that's kind of my biggest concern with him this season, and probably my biggest concern with the Sixers is like, when Embiid's not playing, why isn't Ben Simmons taking over these games? And I talked about it when I had Daniel on the pod. Called him Meta. When I had Daniel on the pod the other day, and we talked about that. We talked about the aggressiveness of Ben Simmons. I think I talked about it when I had Clips on the pod as well, and him just not really stepping into that role. So let's see. So that's why Ben Simmons has been allowed to. But I have some concerns about him not being as aggressive this season when Embiid sits, because that Sixers team looks really, really good. But as we saw with the Raptors, when you win a championship, when your best player is gone, you should still field a competitive team. And that's not what the Sixers do. And I think that that's reason to have some concern because Embiid hasn't been the most durable guy. But yeah. that's conversation for another day. We're not talking about the Sixers. Look at the title, you guys. It's Raptors. Let me shut up about them. So a lot of these questions about the Raptors are about whether or not they have an all-star. Just to answer that really quickly, I think in order for the Raptors to have an all-star, they have to be around 500. They are currently 11-7, and they've got 15 games in the month of February. I think you have to go, and they've got 2 more games left in January. So that's 17 games. You have to go, what is that, like 9-8? Is that, yeah, that adds up to 17. I don't think you can go 9-8 because that doesn't bring them to 500. You've got to go 11-6. You have to go 11-6. Winning these 2 games against Orlando and Sacramento is imperative. So then you're looking at your just 15 games left, and then can you go 9-6 in those, which is going to be really, really tough. Like looking at the slate of games that the Raptors have, that's going to be difficult. But a sigh of relief for Raptor fans is their net rating is still 14th in the league. They are not a bad team. They don't have a negative net rating. Their record does not reflect that, but there's still a lot of positives to take. And I just wanted to spend some time just like pointing that out and really talking about that. Because it's not as bad as it seems. Can they get to 500 by the end of February? I think so. I think it's definitely doable. It's going to be tough. Like looking at their calendar, looking at their schedule here, they're going to be playing a lot of difficult teams. They've got let's see. So they've got Sacramento and Orlando to close out January. Then they start February with Orlando, so they've got kind of that back-to-back, which is really hard to win both of those, as we saw with Indiana, as we saw with the Miami games. It's really hard for a team to win both of those. Then they face Brooklyn. Yikes. Atlanta, still a good team. Memphis, good team. Sure. Washington, okay, that should be a win. Boston, probably a loss. Minnesota should be a win. Then you got Milwaukee on Tuesday and Thursday there. You need to be able to split those, and I trust that the Raptors can do that. Minnesota again, that should be a win. Philly probably should split those. You got 2 of them coming up here. Miami, Houston, and Chicago. That's a gauntlet. Can the Raptors go 9-6? I definitely think so. If they can split those Philly, Milwaukee games 2-2, if they can come out of that 2-2, then I think the Raptors are poised to finish around 500 by the end of February. And if they do that, then I think that they have an all-star. A lot of questions on who that all-star is going to be. Unless something spectacular happens in that stretch with a Fred VanVleet, with an OG, I don't think OG, but maybe with a Pascal Siakam, it's going to be Kyle. Unless something spectacular happens with one of those guys in that stretch, it's going to be Kyle. It's very difficult for Fred VanVleet to become the all-star because it's going to be his first time, and we're talking about a middling team. It's very rare for a guy on a middling team, unless he's putting up, insane numbers to make an all-star team have coaches vote for him. It's very often vets. And so for that reason specifically, I think it would be Kyle Lowry. And it's not like he's not going to be, if not the best player on the team, the second. Like he's going to be in that conversation, even if the raw numbers don't bear it out. So, high-key scared to play Philly with our front court right now. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. I mean, we did see the Raptors played Philly fairly well. I think you're probably just going to let Embiid kind of get his. Baines is a big body, and Baines in the past has played Embiid well. I mean, look at the game that Embiid had against the Lakers. It wasn't an MVP caliber game like he's been doing, but look at his numbers. He still put them up, and that's against Marc Gasol, who has famously made Embiid score 0 points in a game just last season. So, and has been the Embiid stopper. Baines is a big body. Embiid's going to get his. It's a matter of everybody else. And I don't know how much I trust the everybody else on Philly right now, although Tobias is playing really well. So let's get back to some of these questions here. My voice is hoarse, you guys. All right. So a lot of conversation about the All-Star. And if you're 500, can you get there? They're 11-7, you guys. That is so bad. All right, but this is a therapy session. This is not me clamoring on. Okay, so a lot of the conversation is also about, Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster. I can't give any therapy. I'm not Dr. Phil. There's no amount of therapy that I can give you guys when I'm scared. I don't understand the reason that Masai Ujiri hasn't signed. I likened it earlier to the Giannis situation, but it's very different because with Giannis, there was no negotiation to be had. You offer him the Supermax, he's like, all right, that's the most amount of money I can get, and he stays. That's not the case with Masai Ujiri because there is no Supermax that you can give to an executive. But at the same time, I cannot imagine that MLSE would not give the man any and everything that he asks for. To me, they would be ridiculous to not do that. He's the reason that the Raptors had a championship parade. Think about 3 million people on the streets of Toronto. The last parade for like a major North American sports team since I think in my lifetime. I think the last one was when the Jays won when I was born. So it's insane. Like that's how long it's been. I'm old. So yeah, I don't know. Like you have to give him everything, and I don't know why he hasn't signed. Maybe there's more. Maybe I can't imagine it's like leverage and waiting for free agency to see. Why? You give him everything. There's no conversation to be had. So that's an interesting one. It is one that I'm nervous about, but I trust Bobby. And if it goes into that, if it transfers over from Masai Ujiri to Bobby Webster as we transfer over from Kyle Lowry to the young guys in the same time, I think there's something to. I think there's reason to be optimistic because as we see with the roles that Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, and these young guys have taken when the older generation has left, it's been that they've been able to fulfill those roles and really step into their shoes. And it kind of feels like the story ending and a new one beginning. And I think there's some positivity to take into that, although it is nerve-wracking because this team's success is because of Masai Ujiri and Kyle Lowry. They're the only two men left. They're the only two men standing. And it'll be really interesting if we see a change of the guards this summer. I hope not. I hope that they both stay. Also, a lot of conversation about Kyle Lowry trades. I guess why I wanted to have this therapy session, and I'm doing a terrible job of giving a therapy session because I had some points. I haven't been hitting any of them, but I want to talk about this at length. Maybe this is something that I'll write out. Maybe this is something that I'll do on a podcast, or maybe have a longer episode where I'm not speaking at a mile per minute to get all of my thoughts out on here. And honestly, check out Yasmin's piece because I do think it made me think a lot about where this team is at and what this team looks like. And a lot of people are really sad at the Raptors record, and I get it. They're 11-7. The last time they were this bad was literally when Rudy Gay was traded away to Sacramento. They were 12-6 then. And, positivity. They went on to win 48 games that season, which sounds insane. Can you imagine 48 games after being 12-6? That's a game worse than the Raptors are right now. And they ended up winning 48 games. And part of why they ended up winning that many games was because you're trading away this high usage guy who's eating up a lot of the minutes, letting the young people do it. But also, you're trading for a bench. And I know Raptor fans don't have a lot of love for Patrick Patterson, but he was an integral part to this team, a large part to why the Raptors were successful. Same thing with Gravis Vasquez, same thing with bringing in Chuck Hayes. You're bringing in a bench, and that's really, really important. And that's kind of part of the conversation that Yasmin and I were having yesterday when speaking about Kyle Lowry and his net rating and the offensive rating when he's on the court and all that other stuff. I don't think that that's indicative of Kyle Lowry's play. I think Kyle Lowry has still been superb. I think the bench guys around him have gotten worse over time. Starting from that Rudy Gay trade, starting from that bench that sparked the Raptors' streak of consistent wins, starting from there, the Raptors' bench has gotten consistently worse. Why is that, you ask? Because Fred VanVleet was the bench player. Pascal Siakam was a bench player. Norm was a bench player. The Raptors' bench is now starting. Bench mob, as we know it, are starters. And so then the bench just it becomes less, it's not as talented as the Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet bench lineups. And so when you're putting in Kyle Lowry with those same guys, pulling up those 5-man lineups that we were talking about yesterday in the 4-man lineups, the worst offensive ratings were with Kyle, but that's because you're putting Kyle with a bunch of guys that don't really have a bag offensively, that aren't offensively talented. And he's been able to sustain a lot of those lineups. Every time I watch a game, and you'll probably see me tweet in every single game, does Nick Nurse think Kyle is a magician? What is this lineup he's playing him with? And that's just how it's been for Kyle's entire tenor here, regardless if it's Nick Nurse that's coach or Dwayne Casey that's coach. The only difference is I do think the bench talent in the past has been better. And we've seen that in terms of like Kyle's numbers bear out. And we also seen that in terms of team success. And yeah, when you're losing 2 starters from your championship team, and then after that, you're losing 2 of your top 6 guys on the team, that's a lot of talent to bleed out, to now have young people come in. The calls that we're having for Matt Thomas, the calls that people are making to see some of these guys play, I think is proof that the Raptors aren't as deep as they were in years past and aren't going to be as successful, because we would never have been doing this in any of our successful years. This is stuff that you do in your not so successful years. And part of that is because the Raptors don't have the talent. Matt Thomas is a great shooter, and he's a lot of fun to watch. And I've been calling for him. The Raptors have seen the zone time and time again. And what busts the zone is someone who can shoot, someone who can pass. If you have one of the best shooter on your team, it makes sense to play him in those situations. But what he bleeds out on the other end is stuff that I don't think that we're always taking into consideration, because for the longest time, the Raptors bench guys have been really, really good, and that's been part of their success. And just looking through the standings, I get that a lot of Raptor fans are new. I love it. I love having these, I get that it's a new fan base. And honestly, as a Raptor fan, this still feels weird to me. But looking at the standings right now, there's a lot of a lot of noise about where the Raptors are at. And I just want people to breathe and calm down, because teams are allowed to have a bad year. They're allowed to take some bumps. There are some bumps and there's some bruises that are going to be happening, but it's okay. Looking up and down the standings, none of these teams have been as successful as the Raptors. Let's take a look at the Eastern Conference standings. Let me see if I can do this really quickly. All right, so at the top is Philly. Philly was the process. They were the worst team. They're a large part of the reason that the NBA changed their entire lottery system. They changed their lottery system because of how bad Philly was. So they've bottomed out. Milwaukee, they bottomed out. They had a year with Giannis where they won 15 games. 15 games. Okay? Then you've got Indiana. Indiana's had some terrible years. We saw that when they traded away their star. And for one, everything from Indiana has been downhill since they traded Danny Granger. But Brooklyn, we know that Brooklyn's been abysmal for most of the time in the last, decade or so. And they finally got good this year. Boston's probably been one of the only teams with Toronto that has stayed at the top of the East. They still have never won a 56. They haven't had a 56 win season since 2013-2014 when the Raptors did it. In fact, in 2013-2014, the Boston Celtics won 25 games. They haven't been as successful in the regular season. They haven't won a championship like the Raptors have. They haven't posted the regular season numbers that the Raptors had. The Raptors have been the best team in the East. And we got Cleveland here. We know that Cleveland had the LeBron years, but we also know that Cleveland had those years without LeBron, which have all been abysmal except for this season. Atlanta was the poster boy of a middling team when they had Josh Smith and Joe Johnson. Then they gave those guys up. They finally got the 60-win team. Then that floundered, and they've been bad, and now they finally have Trae Young, who's young and exciting. And then the last team that's in the playoffs is the New York Knicks. I don't really need to explain that. So, the Raptors having a down moment, they've consistently been the only team since 2013-2014 that have been at the top of the Eastern Conference. They're finally having a blip. It's not even like it's the end of the world. It's not that bad. I think part of it is that their depth isn't as good as it is. And part of the Raptors' issue is a lot of their guys, like a Norm, like a Fred, like an OG, need probably more playing time and more, higher usage in order to thrive. And the Raptors still have a positive net rating. The sky isn't falling. It's actually pretty good. The Raptors are situated in a really nice place. What took that 12-6 Rudy Gay Raptors team to be a 48-win team and spark this whole thing that we're talking about 7 years later is the fact that they got a bench. They had depth. They weren't arguing about the 13th man minutes on the team because they actually had talent 1 through 9 and could play guys. And I think that that's part of where the Raptors are at right now. All of this talk about Kyle Lowry, let's calm down. He's still the team's best player. He is. He's as much a ceiling raiser as he is a floor raiser to this day. He's still a considerable floor raiser. It's just going to be hard to raise the floor when we're talking about guys that should be the third stringers on this team. And that's what happens when your bench becomes your stars and becomes your starters. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. That's a testament to the Raptors development team. Because at one point, we would probably be talking about Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam in the same way that I'm talking about the bench guys right now. But because of the Raptors development team, we've seen that growth. And we've seen it again right now with Stanley and Boucher. We're going to continue to see it, right? So there's reason to be optimistic. That's my time. I wanted to do it short today. Ended up taking forever. But yeah, I bookmarked everybody's questions, so I probably didn't get to them today, but I do want to address them at a later date. I just thought we needed a little bit of a therapy session, put things into perspective. I hope I did that this morning. If not, I'll try again some other time. Maybe put it in writing. That might be the easiest way to get my thoughts out. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Mwah, mwah. Adios.